Welcome to the RSP cast, actually the RSP-Campus2Canton cast podcast with Felix Sharpe at Sharpe Review on X. I'm Matt Waldman. We're going to talk about Kalel Mullings and Jalen Joly? Justin Joly of NC State. You can see where I'm at right now. I'm actually just knee deep in running backs. But those are two players that are on the rise, and we're going to have Felix talk about them today. And welcome back to the show, Felix. Thanks again for joining us.
I appreciate you having me, Matt, as always. I didn't realize that we're actually on video, so check out Matt's YouTube page, Matt Waldman RSP on YouTube. So I turned on the neon sign behind me, the logo. So I didn't realize that we were on video too. So,
I was just sneaking that on there. I just wanted to see if we could catch you doing anything crazy.
I mean, you probably can most of the time.
Okay.
So you have to watch out.
Yeah. So Kalel Mullings, Michigan, eh? So
yeah.
Why is he on the rise to you?
Kalel Mullings, the last two games, has had 153 and 155 yards rushing. The most recent performance against USC. Now that we have conference realignment, the Big Ten includes Rutgers on the east end and both USC and UCLA on the west side of the country. But it just makes for really great matchups that feel like bowl games in the middle of the season. But Kalel Mullings, the last game against USC, they needed him. He ran for 159 yards in that game. The team only passed for 32 yards in the game with their new quarterback, Alex Orji, making his first start against USC. So, Mullings is becoming an increasingly critical part of this offense for a team that if you're not going to pass, you got to get first downs, you got to stay on the field, you got to keep drives moving. It's really Mullings and not the five-star recruit, the guy who's on the cover of the college football video games, Donovan Edwards. It's not been him. It's been this former linebacker, this 6'2", 233-pound guy who really spent the better part of his first three seasons at linebacker, who is bringing Michigan back to its, Bo Schembechler, student body right, run through the A-gap type roots. So we started to see a slow trickle away from Donovan Edwards and towards Kalel Mullings. Mullings on the season has 17 missed tackles forced. If we want to just compare to Donovan Edwards, who most people who watch college football know, he just has 5 on the season. Mullings is averaging 8.4 yards per attempt on A-gap runs. Right there on the left and right cheek of our center. He's averaging 9.3 yards per attempt on runs through the B gap. I mean, like this guy, this is a Michigan team that more or less wants to play like a 1910 style of football, and they want to just be able to hand the ball off to the running back. And it's been Mullings, not Edwards, that has brought Michigan back to those roots. Of course, Blake Corum, who's now with the Chargers, was the centerpiece of the offense last year. And a lot of people thought that Donovan Edwards would take a big jump. Donovan Edwards, who's had big games against Ohio State, big games in the national championship game last year. But more or less, it seems like those big games came when against where there is no second level, lots of guys in the box, hole opens up, and he just sprints to the goal line. As I can remember 2 years ago, that very much was the game against Ohio State, which is kind of breakout performance. But let me talk more about Mullings. So 9.3 yards per attempt on runs through the B gap. So when they're running through those interior runs, he's just having a lot of success and averaging 5.4 yards after contact. Compare that to Edwards. That's just 6.2 yards after contact. Mullings has 7 runs of 10 yards or more while averaging 8.2 yards per attempt. He's running in the middle and he's getting these chunk runs. And I mean, to be honest, to me, it looks like he's better at what people call vision. I think it's decision making. I don't really understand the term vision, but it's decision making and being patient to set up the block. That's one thing, but he's they're both tall runners, right? Kalel Mullings is 6'2", Donovan Edwards is 6'1", but Kalel Mullings runs a little bit smaller with his pads. He shrinks that tackling surface. That tackling surface. He's the one that kind of explodes through linebackers and defensive backs to fall forward. That's why he's averaging 5.4 yards per 5.4 yards after contact. So, when we talk about players, what's crazy about college football is how quickly the landscape can change. We've had a couple of high-profile quarterbacks in Connor Wegman at Texas A&M and Jackson Arnold at OU lose their positions to underclassmen. And here in Ann Arbor, it feels like, one of the faces of college football, or that the NCAA tried to make the face of college football, is really taking a back seat to this fifth-year, former linebacker. And it's just because he's the interior runner that Michigan wants to establish. And if I could bring this back to Edwards just for a second, we knew coming out of West Bloomfield High School that Donovan Edwards was more of an athlete. Like, you saw him lining up at wide receiver and running legitimate routes, and and he wasn't like this physical, traditional Michigan style running back. Then his freshman season, we're like, that feels like a square peg in a round hole. Like, maybe Donovan Edwards would have been better in one of these spread systems with Lincoln Riley, with Lincoln Riley at USC, with Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State, with some of these Washington State would have been a great place for him, where they kind of spread it out. We didn't think that Michigan was the greatest fit for Donovan Edwards. But then his freshman year, I can't remember who the opponent was. Like, one of the first three games of his freshman season, he had a game with 10 receptions, and they ran him on wheel routes. They lined him up outside. We're like, oh, wow, maybe Jim Harbaugh is actually going to be more creative with this player than we thought. But he hasn't been used that way really since that game. They've been more or less running him into the back of the line of scrimmage. So he's a player that where Mullings is starting to, his profile is starting to rise. Edwards, and let me give Edwards credit. When you see him do the get in space, used on screens, and when they line him outside, that's where he excels. It's not the tough, the gritty yards, the Bo Schembechler yards that he excels at. So there's a chance that Edwards could have more success at the next level when you get an offensive coordinator that says, like Ben Johnson with Jahmyr Gibbs, that says, I can line this guy up everywhere. I think Edwards might have success if an offensive coordinator is going to choose to use him that way. That's not happening at Michigan. So when we talk about players on the rise, and we talk about just how the landscape of college football is changing, at least from a player perspective, I really got to point out Kalel Mullings' rise and Donovan Edwards kind of taking a back seat.
So quick question. So quick questions for you about this, Felix. That's a lot of great info, but is Kalel Mullings on the rise in college, or is he on the rise in the eyes of people? Do you think he should be on the rise in the eyes of people who are studying the game for the NFL level? Because to me, he sounds like some Michigan. He sounds like he could either be a real find, or he could be like some former Michigan RBs in Jim Harbaugh's system who are like 6th round picks who were picked too high in the 6th round.
Like Hassan Haskins, who was drafted by the Titans. Or he could be Tyler Algier, coming out of BYU, had a very similar career trajectory, starting at linebacker and then going to the running back position. He's not somebody who's going to tear up the combine, at least not from my perspective. Now, speed is not something that I really care about at the running back position, but a lot of people do. You can see him getting, somebody catching up with him from behind. Let me answer the question. The honest answer is I don't really know.
Okay,
I
good.
think that the NFL could look at his age and his, at least my perceived lack of elite athletic traits. I'm talking about like straight line speed, 3-cone drill. I don't know that he's necessarily going to have great success at those things. And he could be, the 6th or 7th round draft pick that makes a roster on special teams because he has that linebacker backfield, and then gets on the field. And
so to make it a little bit easier, and maybe you might, and you have the choice to say none of the above, but if I give you some list of players, who does he lean more towards? When you tell me about players like this, I think, okay, you mentioned Tyler Algier. Let's think Jordan Howard. Let's think Hassan Haskins. Who does he lean more towards of those three?
I don't think it's Algier.
Okay.
It's either and I don't think it's Howard either. Oh God. Of the three that you gave me, I feel like I have to pick Haskins, but
you think he has more upside than Haskins? So he's somewhere between like Howard and Haskins.
It's easy for me to say that because I'm watching him play, and it's fresh in my memory. I think that he does have more upside than Haskins, but we're still probably talking about a day 3 draft pick.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, Kyren Williams was a day 3 draft pick, and
that's true.
And we saw that you find the right fit, it can work out pretty well. Carson Steele.
So was Braylon Allen.
Braylon Allen was a day 3 draft pick. Yeah, he had no business being one if he had, but that had more to do with him, I think, than it had to do with his ability. But Carson Steele was an undrafted free agent, right? So
yes, he was.
Yeah. So I mean, these are guys. Is Carson Steele in the conversation? Maybe as a guy who runs hard for that like that.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, and there's one thing that kind of always sticks in my mind when I'm watching running backs, and it's something that I learned from you, is that you always talk about the story about evaluating Darren McFadden, and you didn't. I think if could be misremembering, but you didn't see him run through like defensive backs, players that were small.
Correct.
Yeah, and man, I'm telling you, a flat-footed cornerback can send Donovan Edwards backwards. And I'm just like, who's coming out? And I just don't understand it, because Donovan Edwards is 6'1", 212. And that quarterback that just trucked him is 180 pounds. Yeah. And I don't understand it, but I think that you'll see that when you watch, when you evaluate Edwards.
Kalel, oh yeah, for sure. So far I've seen a lot of Edwards in space, and I've seen him on some gap plays where he gets some really nice lanes, and that all looks great. But it's the difference between a guy who gets drafted and a guy who actually becomes a cog in an NFL lineup.
There's a run in the national championship game against Washington last season where Edwards does exactly what we saw him do, like put his head all the way down. And I'm sorry, move my head away from the mic. Put his head all the way down, run into the back of the line of scrimmage. There's nothing there. He just kind of jukes to the right because nothing's moving there. And, because the defense all got sucked in, he takes off for a touchdown. But it's like I don't know that you can count on those type of breaks at the next level.
I mean, Steve Slayton had a little bit of a run doing things like that. But, I didn't think he was all that great either. And he had a hot year, and then pretty much after that, it wasn't like, he couldn't sustain. Now, injury was probably part of that too, but I thought he was, I hate to say it this way, because he was a good college back, but he was the luckiest runner in his first year with the Texans with runs like that you're just like, yeah, I don't know. I guess there's always 1 out of 1,000 backs who can get away with that stuff, who can get that happening for him for a year. But that's interesting. The more backs you're aware of in fantasy, whether it's college or NFL, the better, because there's so many different ways to fit these guys. There's so many injuries, and they're late round guys get opportunities. Teams are starting to realize that we can kind of have open tryouts with running back. I don't think it's become a major trend yet, but we've seen a little bit more often. Sean Payton was like, look, we're going to have open competition with running backs because we feel like that no matter where they're drafted, there's a lot of talent there. So Jaleel McLaughlin getting that opportunity for sure. Blake Watson they kept on the active roster. Tyler Beatty, certainly had some opportunities this weekend. none of
Jordan
these.
Mason for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, another
Jordan,
undrafted guy.
absolutely, and that's after Elijah Mitchell, and Isaac Orendo's sitting there waiting in the wings, and yeah, Mason. I mean, listen, I mean, I always thought it was interesting that as much as you love Jahmyr Gibbs, when Jordan Mason was paired with Jahmyr Gibbs, apparently he had a year that PFF rated him as the most elusive back in football based on some of the stats and grades that they did. And when you look at Mason this weekend, he's a legit back. I think Jordan Mason could start for 60% of the NFL teams in the league if they needed him to. And I think that I'm not going to say he's better than 60% of the starting running backs in the league, but I'd say it's close. I'd say it's pretty close. I mean, the way he mitigates losses, the way he moves, he can catch the ball, and he's a hard runner. He runs hard for his size, but the thing in his bag that people don't realize is how elusive he is, and it's efficient in the way that he does it. So, yeah, these guys are interesting. So Kalel Mullings certainly one to watch out for. That's a great get. So, what about this kid over at NC State? What about this tight end? You had an interesting kind of comp for how he's used with a Raiders tight end, but not quite the one that we're like, drooling over right now.
No, not Brock Bowers, Harrison Bryant actually. Harrison Bryant. If I'm mistaken, I think Harrison Bryant won the Mackey Award.
Yeah,
he came out, used as a big slot wide receiver at Florida Atlantic. Justin Joly is the player. Justin Joly, tight end NC State. He's a transfer from Jim Moore's UConn team, went to NC State. And he went to NC State because their offensive coordinator, Robert Anae, has a history of they even call it like a flex position where he just creates mismatches with these types of players. So Oronde Gadsden, not Oronde Gadsden who played for the Dolphins, but Oronde Gadsden Jr., his son at Syracuse, who's designated as a tight end, but is really like a big slot wide receiver. Jelani Woods, who's on ER with the Colts, with the Indianapolis Colts, had his best season at Virginia with Robert Anae as his offensive coordinator. I think, man, Justin Joly, I love his route running ability, his run after the catch ability. I mean, he runs routes like a wide receiver, like a big wide receiver. And he has sticky, like he's not afraid to extend his hands away from his body and then pluck the ball out of the air. And he's really been the number 2 guy there for NC State. Now I know you love Kevin Concepcion. NC State also brought in a former 5-star transfer from Ohio State, Noah Rogers. The beat writers were very big on Rogers because Ohio State was next to his name and because 5-star, you look on 24/7's rankings. But, man, when I watched – and I put a video in the offseason on Justin Joly, I was like, when I watched this dude, he's outmatched at UConn playing against Tennessee, and they can't, contain this dude. And obviously he transfers to NC State. 6'3", 235. Okay. That's 235. So, I believe Harrison Bryant was like a similar size coming out of college. 14 receptions, 225 yards on the season thus far. He now has a true freshman quarterback throwing him the ball. But still, I mean, against Clemson, 3 receptions for 73 yards. That was his most recent play. I wanted to highlight him because, one, I think that he is – if he was 6'5", 242, I don't think we would be having this conversation. Well, yeah, he's going to be an NFL, probably day 2 NFL draft pick. Because he's 6'3", 235, very long wingspan. I'm like, can the NFL find a place for this guy to be not a tight end that you would use on every down, but somebody who could create mismatches, somebody who's going to be a tough cover for linebackers, who's going to be probably a tough cover for a lot of safeties out there. I think that he's definitely a chess piece. I mean, there was a time when Ed Dixon coming out of Oregon yeah. was a similar style player, and I don't know that Ed Dixon ever had the career that we we thought he would when he did as well as he did in college and how he tested athletically. But I had to highlight Justin Joly because of that route running ability, the ability to run after the catch, make defenders miss.
So he's better. Yeah, the thing about Ed Dixon, I remember, was he was a very straight line player. So Joly certainly has a little bit more on Dixon in that regard. That's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just, in goal line packages, I don't know that he's going to be out there. But, I mean, Evan Ingram isn't much bigger than Justin Joly. I mean, Evan Ingram's probably between 230 and 240?
Probably, and he was 230, 235 when he came out of Ole Miss.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, playing with Chad Kelly down there with Ole Miss. So, I wanted to highlight him because I love him as a college player. I think that he could be used as a chess piece in the right offensive system, but probably not an every down tight end, at least to start. But somebody you should be watching out for.
Nice. Well, those sound like two good players for sure that are worth consideration. Certainly you can find out more about emerging players when you go to Campus2Canton.com. You can find, you can also certainly play in a really awesome type of league setup where basically you're drafting college players and building a college team and a pro team, and your college players migrate over to your pro team. So it's like a farm system for your pro fantasy team, but you're also playing college fantasy football. So you're really getting the excitement of both Saturday and Sunday games, or Saturday and every other day of the week. In terms of there's no day off, they should just call it to the end, NDO instead of NFL. No day off should probably be what the NFL is at this point, or they're getting close to it. But yeah, I mean, check out Campus2Canton.com. They've got a lot of great analysts over there, including Felix, and they've got podcasts going on, pretty much multiple times a week, and of course they have their own guides for recruiting and the draft, and you can check out their thoughts on ththese players. I mean, they're often pretty early on hitting on guys, when they talk about, say, a guy like Quinshon Judkins, before, when everyone else was talking about other recruits, Quinshon Judkins was a guy they were very high on, as an example of many where they're beating people to the punch.
Yeah, Quinshon was a 3-star. I think he was the 82nd ranked running back in his class. And that particular year, there were two guys who were at the top. This is Nick Singleton's class, so Nick Singleton is going to be a player that people will talk about a lot, here in a couple of months. But it was Emmanuel Henderson, who was like 6'3", 180, or like, really, he's a running back. He's a running back, and then they were in high school. They'd run him on all these jet sweeps, on all this outside stuff. Like, how's this dude a running back? Now he's a wide receiver at Alabama, like I thought. And then Raleek Brown. Raleek Brown was coming out of Mater Dei, which is the high school that Bryce Young went to, and a lot of other, they have a great track record of national powerhouse. And we were like, this dude, Quinshon Judkins, is probably better than these dudes. Now, both of those players are now, both Raleek Brown and Emmanuel Henderson are now playing, wide receiver, and Quinshon Judkins is probably a top 2 or 3 back in this upcoming class.
Yeah, it's certainly a fun back to watch. So, speaking of fun things to watch, is there any games this week on the college slate? Is there a game this week? Just pick one that you find really intriguing.
Yes, of course. The only one that really matters is it's going to be one. It's going to be Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah, was that what that was? I thought that might be the case. Oh, hold on.
Yeah,
that's
Georgia
right. I
and
forgot
Alabama.
about that. Georgia, Alabama. That could be an okay game. Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about, guys who are going to end up on your dynasty rosters. They're all over the place in this game. I don't even know where to start. I think, let's start with Justice Haynes. Justice Haynes, running back out of your home state of Georgia there at Buford. Shout out to Buford High School, which is another national powerhouse.
Not far from here.
And not as a national power. Dylan Royola, who's the Dominic Royola's son, he was there at Buford for a season. But the running backs on Alabama's side between Jam Miller and Justice Haynes are a really great duo. Justice Haynes' dad, Veron Haynes, played for the Steelers, played with Jerome Bettis and Roethlisberger.
Georgia running back, fullback, actually.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, they thought that Justice was going to go to Georgia because of his connection with his father. So that's the running back room. Jeremy Bernard was a national player, wide receiver, Alabama, still on the Alabama side here. He's National Player of the Year coming out of Las Vegas. He's followed Kalen DeBoer. He was with Kalen DeBoer at Washington, with them at Alabama now. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ryan Williams, who's a 17-year-old freshman who's averaging we talked. Last time I checked, we talked about him last week.
Yeah, we talked about him 2 weeks ago.
Yes. He's averaging
Jeremiah
30
Smith.
yards per catch.
Yeah.
Yes, he's averaging 30 yards per reception. Yeah. He's leading the team in catches, and then obviously, Jalen Milroe is going to be a really interesting case study for the quarterback there for Alabama. Is going to be a really interesting case study because he's probably underdeveloped as a passer, but you can't deny what he is as a rushing threat. And we've kind of seen some of these players. I think of Jalen Hurts specifically, going from Alabama to Oklahoma, how he developed as a passer, and now Jalen Milroe has, one of the best offensive play callers in the country in Kalen DeBoer. So, that's on the Alabama side. On the Georgia side, Georgia always has a running back that you need to be watching for. I think this time next year we will be calling Nate Frazier one of the best running backs in the country there. He's a true freshman. He's 212, but he has a 10-400-meter dash time underneath his belt. He was considered to be the scat back there at Georgia, but he's been running in the middle and just looks like the best back there. By the way, the backfield that's absolutely loaded. So I would watch out for Nate Frazier. And then Carson Beck, is just boring and good. He's just boring and good. He throws wide receivers open. He loves the back shoulder. He loves the middle of the field. He loves being aggressive, throwing the ball in those intermediate and deep parts of the field. Probably not going to impress you with his rushing ability, a real pocket passer, but can move and avoid pressure. Carson Beck's story is interesting because, there was another elite recruit that was in quote unquote in front of Carson Beck coming in that freshman season, and Brock Vandegrift, also from Georgia,
Athens.
Georgia. Yeah. He was going to go to OU. He was going to go to Lincoln Riley's, go with Lincoln Riley until Lincoln Riley signed Caleb Williams, and that's when Brock Vandegrift changed his commitment. Anyway, this is his second year as a starter. He has full command of the offense. For my money, Carson Beck's going to be the first quarterback off the board, and it's going to be it's Georgia, Alabama. It's always an excellent game, but those are some players that you need to. Is there a wide receiver at Georgia that you need to think about? Let me think here for a second. No, I don't think so. I think I've named the folks that you really need to pay attention to.
No, that sounds great. So definitely you can check out more of this, obviously, at Campus2Canton. This week with the rookie scouting portfolio and what we have at Football Guys, I've just finished some tape on Jaden Daniels, Braylon Allen, and Bo Nix. We'll see where I have that ending up tomorrow. I may, one of them will probably be a gut check column, or two of them will be. One or two of them will be RSP features. But I can tell you that, it's fascinating to watch the hype on Jaden Daniels and watch the way people are down on Bo Nix, and then to see how those offenses are run. And I'll just say that, Jaden Daniels has a chance to be a really good quarterback in this league. Bo Nix has a chance to be a really good quarterback in this league. And right now, I think if you were to say where they were, most people would say they're very far apart in perception right now. But I'll say this, just as a tease for people, 37% of his passes coming into Monday night were at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And after last night, he had 6 passes of more than 25 yards all year. 4 of them came last night, and he did a pretty good job of that. And he's a good vertical passer. But no one has forced him to move to his left yet. He has not thrown a single pass on the left side at the pocket. So, it's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunity for defenses to kind of adjust to Jaden Daniels. Whereas with Bo Nix, it's kind of interesting because this weekend there were a lot of downfield throws early in the game that he hit and a lot of timing shots to receivers, and people were talking about him as more of an RPO dump-off guy, and that's all you're seeing. And then against Tampa Bay, he came out and looked really good with a lot of throws that you didn't see in the first 2 games. So maybe these guys their perceptions are in opposite directions, but they may both come back to the middle a little bit later on. And Braylon Allen, Jets are using him in a bully ball perspective. 13 personnel, fullback leading the way, and he looks good doing what he does well, and certainly an asset for the New York Jets right now. So you can stay tuned for those. And thanks again for checking in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about more college football players on this show, and we'll see you next time.